welcome to the panel In Conversation for Wickle. As you know, we're here to talk about our experiences as women from the BAME community, and I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves in a moment. I'm going to start with me. I'm Judy Khan. I was called to the bar in 1989. I was appointed as a silk in 2010, and I've been joint head of Garden Court Chambers for the last 3.5 years.
I'm Laurie-Anne Power. I'm at 25 Bedford Row. I was called to the bar in 2000. I sit on many different committees dealing with race and diversity, and last year I very proudly won UK Legal Awards Diversity Lawyer of the Year.
Well done.
I'm Ravinder Saimbhi. I'm at 33 Bedford Row. I was called to the bar in 2016, but I had been a solicitor and a High Court solicitor advocate for 18 years before that. I am involved in various things. I have to say I'm a little bit more organic. I get involved in social mobility, networking events. I like to offer mini pupilages to basically anybody who asks, because I think that the only way forward is by keeping the ladder down and continuing to keep people coming up behind you.
Yeah. I'm Thalia Maragh. I'm at Garden Court Chambers. I was called to the English bar in 2009, but that was after transferring from the Jamaican bar, where I had been in practice for several years, having been called to the Jamaican bar in 1999. I am an advocacy trainer at Middle Temple, and since I've been here practicing in England, I, at any given time, mentor young Black kids, whether it is somebody who is coming into the profession or high school students. So that's what I do outside of the formal practice.
I'm Sandra Paul. I am a solicitor advocate. I am employed at Kingsley Knapley Solicitors, so I've been a partner there for several years now. I came to law as a second career, so didn't quite get it right the first time. So I was a social worker before, not that it's not a great job and really useful, but law came as a second option to me. I involved with lots and lots of things since I've been working in this area since 2001, but perhaps the most exciting thing for me at the moment is that I'm chairing a justice working party that is looking at the overrepresentation of BAME children in the youth justice system. Social mobility, I think, is a really key issue for BAME communities so far as law is concerned, and also took part in a competition last year called the Legal Apprentice, designed to broaden the opportunities. I think that one of the issues that I had as a child, and which I think is still real, is that I didn't think I could be a lawyer. I just didn't think that I was good enough to do it. And so as many people as I can tell that you absolutely can do this if you apply yourself, that's what I'm particularly interested in.
Hi, my name's Ashwinder. I'm a senior solicitor at ABV Solicitors. I was called to the bar in 2005, and I tried for pupillage for almost 5 years and wasn't successful. I then completed my qualified lawyer's transfer test and dual qualified as a solicitor, and I haven't looked back since.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Wilson. I am a barrister at 5 St Andrews Hill. I practice in crime and family law. I'm also on a few committees, so I'm on the Criminal Bar Association committee as a social mobility committee member, and also on the Middle Temple Hall committee, and on one of the sub equality and diversity committees. And I've also just written a book, which I'm really excited about, which is called In Black and White, and it's about race and class in the justice system.
I'm Tejal-Roma Williams. I am a senior Crown Prosecutor, and I qualified in 2012. Prior to working for the CPS, I was in defence with Hodge Jones and Allen. I often go back to the College of Law, which is where I studied, and sit on discussion panels with them, showing students that are aspiring for a career in law, speaking to them and mentoring them as to the options they have, and also to try and be a positive role model to show that, you know, it is possible, following on from what Sandra said. I am a member of the NBCPA at the CPS, and it's an organisation within the CPS for Black and Asian lawyers. And when I return off maternity leave, I hope to be more active within that organisation and try and incorporate that organisation together with women in criminal law. That's the plan.
Right.
My name is Cecilia. I'm a solicitor with Stephensons Solicitors. I'm a consultant solicitor there. I qualified in 2008 and I specialise in criminal law and also undertake some immigration work. I sit on a board of trustees for an organisation called Stop and Search Legal Project, in which we go out to schools, colleges, youth clubs, wherever we can find young people, teaching them about their rights when stopped and searched, but most importantly, how to deal with that stop and search with the police to make sure that it doesn't escalate into any offences being committed and so forth. I also take part every year in a project where we do outreach work around the country for an organisation called Social Mobility Business Partnership, and we go into once a year into sports places like Man United Football Club, Arsenal, and we basically mentor and teach young people about having sort of self-esteem and resilience, and basically trying to meet the challenges the world may throw at them.
I'm sure we would all agree that our profession is still a white male middle class dominated profession, and that as a result of that there have been challenges for all of us in entering and making our way in our journey through our careers. So I want to kick off by asking the panel about that. So I'm going to ask Laurie-Anne first. Can you tell us about the challenges that you faced entering the profession and what you did to overcome them?
So when I entered the profession, I had a set of personal challenges as well as what I knew was going to be professional challenges, because I was Black and because I was a woman and because I grew up on a council estate in East London. And so cumulatively, it was a really daunting prospect to me. I knew in my heart of hearts I'd always wanted to be at the bar, and having gone through the difficulty of the education process and lack of funding and all the rest of it, when I stepped my foot in chambers the very first day, having secured pupillage, I buzzed the buzzer of my then chambers. It was in Middle Temple. Buzzed the buzzer, and the door was opened by quite a junior member of chambers, who immediately directed me to the bottom of the stairs to pick up the bag of tea towels that were waiting, because he had assumed that I was the tea towel lady. So he just basically said, "It's down there at the bottom on the left in the bag." So I go down to the bottom of the stairs thinking I'm going to meet my supervisor and they're going to be waiting with biscuits and tea. I look around and I go back upstairs, and I just couldn't first figure it out. So I said to him, "I've been down there, but I can't see anyone down there." He said, "You're the tea towel lady, aren't you?" And I said, "No." I said, "I'm here, it's my first day." As a pupil, he's now a good friend, and he was mortified by it and directed me to the clerk's room and so on. And that was my first experience. And that first day, actually, I put on a mask. It's a mask that conceals and hides all of our embarrassments and our hurt and our pain. And I wore that mask, I'd say, for about the first 10 years. And Maya Angelou, in her adaptation of Paul Laurence Dunbar's poem, describes it best. It's the mask that we put on. We smile, we cheer when we're in situations that are really uncomfortable. And I wore that. And I think when I took that mask off about 10 years ago, things radically changed for me. I had my first child when I was 18 years old. And when I entered the profession, I entered as a single mum with no money, no pupillage award, nothing. I had a scholarship from Middle Temple that had to last me, and I knew it wouldn't, because I was renting one room in a house. And so I had those financial challenges as well as those personal challenges. And then when I entered as a pupil, I very quickly became aware that I was the Black option. So This is as good as it's going to get. And I didn't know anyone at the bar then 20 years ago. Those were the challenges I faced. I'd worked in a chambers making tea and answering the phones. And so I had been privy to conversations about how women, and particularly women with women, were allocated work. So working in a classroom in a chamber in the Middle Temple during my degree and then doing my bar, I very quickly realised that women with children were very much put to the bottom of the pile when it came to the allocation of work, because they seemed to be the least reliable. They couldn't travel, they had childcare issues, and so on and so forth. So I made the decision. Now I look back, and maybe I could have made a decision, but I made the decision not to tell anyone that I was a single mum and that I had this poor little girl, latchkey kid at home, who literally used to wait and no one knew about her. And I know at the time that was the right decision, because I know the environment I was in, the chambers I was in, it would have been held against me. No one would have said anything, but being a black single mum coming from East London, I really would have been subjected to all the stigmas that attracted 20 years ago. I'm glad to say I don't think it's as bad now, but then I knew it was. And so I had to effectively, essentially hide my personal life while trying to pursue pupillage, which then lasted about 2 years. Like I said, for the first 10 years, I wore that mask. And when it became apparent to me that actually there were women out there who I saw and I realised that I looked up to. So, for example, I remember I'd heard the story of Judy Khan and how amazing she was. But I remember the first time I saw her, and this was a really stark contrast to other senior black women. There were a handful, I could count them on my hand, to the reception I got from Judy as compared to the reception I got from others. Because immediately, you're young, you look young. Some of the other senior black women I saw weren't as warm to me. And I walked into the Old Bailey female robing room, and Judy was there, and I can't remember what event it was, but she'd had her hair straightened. So she was in there, and it was like watching a Head and Shoulders advert. So she comes up, hair swishes around, and she looks up and sees me, and she says, "Oh, hello." And I'm like, and the rest is history. It was just, and from that moment, I realized there was absolutely nothing artificial about her. There was nothing there was no mask, there was no shield. And I realized everyone loves her. Everyone speaks highly of her. She's brilliant. We can, in this profession, be ourselves. And from then, I just realized somebody says something, I'm not going to smile and laugh off a racist comment because I feel uncomfortable about it. I call it. And since then, I'd say consistently for the past 12 or so years, I call it every single time. I do not accept it. I do not tolerate it. And other people will follow. And actually, it will make people think twice. So that's my journey of entering the profession, overcoming the issues. A long way to go, but I love this job. There is no job like it in the world. I absolutely love it. If I could do it every day for the rest of my life, I would. And I think about what Angela Davis says. I look back over the last 20 years of my profession, and when I walked in and I was directed to those tea towels, I never would imagine that 20 years later, I would be Diversity Lawyer of the Year. I would be on the CBA Executive Committee. I would be on the Bar Standards Board's Race Equality Task Force, and so on, and so on, and so on. So we can effect change. And I'm happy to say that now, I think collectively, we can start to effect change just that bit more quickly.
Thank you very much, Laurie-Anne. That's very inspiring, and I'm a bit embarrassed by what you said about me. But I have to say that the thing that amuses me the most is after I was recruited to Garden Court, sort of 7 years into the job, I found a letter in a box from Henry Blaxland saying, "Dear Miss Khan, thank you for your application to Garden Court. I'm sorry to say that it's been unsuccessful. I didn't even get an interview as a pupil, so it tickles me that I'm now a joint head of a chambers. I didn't manage to make it into, not even for an interview as a pupil." I'm going to ask that same question now to Thalia.
So unlike Laurie's journey, mine has been a little different because, as I said, I transferred from the Jamaican bar. And I, as a transferring practicing lawyer from another Commonwealth jurisdiction, I wasn't required to go through the process of competitive pupillage. And I was lucky in that I was, and I say sponsored because it was a Jamaican-born barrister who had spent some time in Jamaica, and we had a mutual friend from Jamaica. And I came to England to do a master's in human rights and international criminal law at King's, and then I came back the following year to get some experience in the profession here. And I spent that year working at a solicitor's firm, Bernberg Pierce. And again, I mention sponsors because one of my biggest sponsors in the profession is a partner there, a Black woman, Marcia Willis Stewart. And having worked as an attorney, working in a solicitor's office in the civil department, because I was doing inquest work, it meant that I was doing a lot of paperwork and I wasn't going to court. So I wanted, having been in Jamaica as an advocate, I missed that side of things. And so I continued the journey here, which was never intended to be, almost 15 years later, it was intended to be short term. I wanted to get some experience at the bar, but as a part of the training, I had to do advocacy. And one of the exercises was a bail application, you know, as a part of your advocacy process. So for the bail exercise, I went, you know, before a high court judge, and I was with two other white male pupils who to me spoke the same way. You know where I'm going with this, public school educated stereotype. And I am Little Miss Jamaica, because if it's one thing you know about Jamaicans, we are very confident people. So unlike you, Laurie, I'm not wearing a mask, you know, I am me. So, you know, I go, I prepare my little self, I'm making my bail application, and I'm thinking I've done well, because I even convinced myself that my client must get bail. And, you know, the other two young men did well too. It was a simple exercise. But what the judge said was, in fact, it went over my head initially, because he said, oh, you know, well done, well done. But there's just one thing, one comment I have to make. And it is that, you know, it is always good to have a neutral accent. And so you may want to consider doing elocution lessons. So listen to me now. I am very confident in the way I speak. And as far as I'm concerned, when I speak, the objective is that you understand me. And there was nothing about my delivery that this man couldn't understand. And another shortcoming of mine is that I don't hide my expression. So when Mr. Judge said, you know, elocution lessons, to be honest with you, initially, it's like, I didn't understand what he said, but then the penny dropped and I looked at him and he said, no, you know, I'm not saying that any of you here would need it, but I'm just saying, you know, it's good to have a neutral accent. And this was now my second year in England, or going into my third year in England, not having the network of university friends per se, wondering, what the hell was I doing? Why am I going on this journey where somebody at the outset is saying to me, you don't speak well enough, essentially, to enter the profession? And it was potentially crippling, because I honestly wondered whether I should embark upon this elocution lessons exercise, because you want to make it, you want to succeed. He wasn't talking to the two boys who sounded, you know, who had the neutralized accent. He was talking to me. And again, this is where sponsorship comes in, because at the time I was living in a Jamaican household. And my friend, who was in her late 50s, and she had a career in banking in the city, a Jamaican woman, I told her, And she said to me, you know, I did it. When I came into the city in the 80s, there's no way that I could have made it with or felt that I could have made it with my Jamaican accent. And so I did the elocution lessons. But I want to tell you something. You be you, and you be confident in you, because being different has its advantages. Mm-hmm. You're going to stand out. Yeah. And standing out is good. Mm-hmm. Because it's a good way to get your message across. Mm-hmm. But it means that you'll always be seen. Mm-hmm. So you have to be as good as or better than the rest. And as Black women, you know, and women from BAME backgrounds, we know that. We know that we stand out. We know that the odds are usually against us. And it forces us to be better. You know, to be heads and shoulders, not the ad, above the rest. And so I took what could have been a crippling experience for me, because I was actually down for a few days, and I reflected on, you know, do I really want to do this? You know, should I just go back to Jamaica? Because this is just a journey I've taken on. And I reflected for many years on what my friend said to me about standing out, you know, being better than the rest. And that for me made the difference in my decision to carry on and to retain my identity. Can you imagine?
Sandra, you've had a rather different journey into the profession, because as you've said, you were a social worker before. So can you tell us about your challenges, and what would you advise other people from a BAME background, women similar to yourself, coming into the profession? What would you advise them?
So I think the thing for me was just kind of coming at this from a standing start. So my mum reminds me now that I'd said when I was much younger that I wanted to be a barrister. And I don't know what happened at school, because I didn't do too badly, but just that aspiration disappeared, so that by the time I finished, even though I had good A-levels, I didn't think of law as an option. And so I think that one of the main things for me is about keeping people's horizons open, clear, positive, not kind of making it small because you think nobody has made me think I can do this, or I don't have the resource to do this. And I think that for me, even though I kind of feel proud of where I've got to so far, there is a little bit of me that laments the bit that I missed, because I think that the trajectory might have been different if I'd started earlier. So what I did know that I could do, I was good with people, I was good at reading people, I wanted to do something that helped people. So I went into social work, which was a really interesting, fulfilling job, but it was really hard because I was doing child protection work. And you know, the thing that kind of got me moving was I was sat behind a barrister who was presenting on a case that I had prepared, and I'd done a very long statement about it. And she was good, but it wasn't as good as I'd written it. I was like, no. It's time to stop sitting behind people and get your act together. And of course, at that stage, it was absolutely a standing start, and not just a standing start. I had like 2 small children, lucky enough to have a mortgage to pay, but still a big mortgage to pay. And I thought, how am I going to do this? But I did. I started part-time doing the conversion while I was working, and kids, juggling, all the rest of it. And then, of course, the kind of lack of information and not being plugged into the system begins to hit you at every point, because then you start saying, right, okay, I've got good grades on the conversion, need to do a legal practice course, how am I going to do that, finance it? And then you say, right, what about jobs? And here's a kind of classic example of where the inequality hit. I just don't have a network. Where do you start? Yeah. And not only do I not have a network, but I don't understand the language of this landscape. So there's me, right, in my training contracts, writing to Farahs saying, you have a family department, you're wanting to help families, you're wanting to keep them together, you are interested in those who are dispossessed. Hell no. That's not what that practice does. I didn't get that. I didn't have a perspective about what the legal field looks like. And so perhaps quite expectedly, I found it initially difficult to get training contracts. And then I found Hodge Jones and Allen, actually. And I applied there and I thought, okay, that's a good fit. And I think it was it you that said, Judy, that the first time round I didn't get an interview. But they obviously didn't recruit, and they came back around again and had me in for an interview. And you know, I walked out of that interview and I go, I know I got that job. Because they were sitting there like eyes agog, kind of like, where is this whirlwind coming from? Because at that point, I didn't have anything to lose. I was like, I'm clearly not getting one anyway, so I might as well just be my best self and talk about what I know. And I got that job. And I know that it was really hard work for me, for my family, for all those people who supported me. I'm going to talk about allies in a minute. But I kicked ass at that job. And I think it's probably still a record. I was promoted to partner. It was the fastest promotion to partnership in that firm ever. Because I worked hard. I knew I had the capacity to do it. I was given good opportunities. I took those opportunities, even if it's like an unattractive thing to do. If it's an important part for that organization, just do it. Get to know your clients, provide them with the best service. And it's paid off. Now, at every level, and I think that I'm still working hard at it because I still have challenges. No matter, and sometimes it's easy to look at successful people and think they don't have challenges. I have challenges every day. But what I have now that I didn't have then, and what I would say to somebody else is, you are capable. Just keep telling yourself that. No matter what it looks like, no matter what you're getting as feedback, that's not about you. That's about somebody else's issue. You are capable. And if you work hard and you apply yourself, that's going to out at some point.
Yeah.
Challenges continue, but just keep working at them.
Yeah, thank you, Sandra. I'm going to ask Cecilia to tell us a bit about the challenges that she faced and what.
So my journey was quite tough, but I think what I'll pick up on is what Sandra just said about the fact that people do have challenges, but it's just a belief in yourself and, you know, following on from that. So unfortunately for me, my mum died when I was 3 in childbirth to my younger brother, and then my father died when I was 12. So at the age of 12, I became a mother, a sister, I was always a sister, a best friend, and an auntie, a confidant to my little brother. So I had to grow up. And life as it went on was tough. It was really, really difficult. But sometimes when I look back, I still don't understand how I did it. I still don't understand how I'm stood here today doing what I do. But one thing I do know is I believed in myself, even at that young age. And I believed that there was more to me and I had more to give. So I decided I wanted to go into law. I had no support. I didn't know anybody that, you know, in this country who'd been to university. My father was obviously university educated, but, you know, we were immigrants, first generation immigrants in my family. So I didn't have that support in England in terms of where I could go or be told you can go here and this is how you do things. So I just had to figure it out. And it was figuring it out whilst in the midst of having to also provide for a young person who relied on me, which was my younger brother. So we were raised by aunts and uncles who did a great job. And, you know, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. But I still had to provide for him in terms of pocket money, dinner money, and so forth. So I started university, and I went to university with only one plan, and it was plan A. I didn't have a plan B, a plan C. I was going to be a lawyer, and that's all I had. So I had to give it everything I had. So went off to university with dreams of becoming a lawyer. But whilst I was at university, I obviously needed to work because I needed to pay rent for where I was living. but I still needed to make sure that I was feeding and contributing to my younger brother's upkeep. So I had 3 jobs whilst going to university. And in those days, it was great because there was, I don't know, for those who do criminal law, you may remember we had a thing called outdoor clerking, where you went along to court with a barrister, you know, kind of thinking, I'm going to change the world, set the world on fire with your little notebook. And that's what I did. So I used to do outdoor clerking for a firm called Murray's. I also, going back to Thalia, have something in connection with you because I also worked for Bernberg Pierce. And people like Marcia Willis-Stewart, Irene Nembard, they were phenomenal because they also gave me a chance. So I would do reception work at those times. So I'd finish uni and I'd go to do reception from about 6 p.m. until about 8, because in those days we didn't have, you know, phones that could be switched over. You had to have someone manually answering the phone. And it was amazing because I learned so much about what happens in a law firm, you know, but that was training, and that showed me that everything you do leads somewhere, and connections and people you meet, you know, it all works out to being something. And then I also worked at Ladbrokes as my 3rd job. So for me, you know, hard work was something that I had to do. There was no kind of, oh, I don't feel like it. I just had to get on with it. But what I did manage to do is then get connections. And in the end, I ended up, when I finished my degree, having to make a choice. And Bernberg Pierce had said, come and work with us in civil. But then Murray's Partnership had offered me a paralegal position as officer paralegal in the crime department. And that sounded more fun. So there off I went. And that's where the story started. And even during, you know, me having got my foot in the door, it was tough. You know, it was really, really hard work. You know, I never left the office before 8 because you didn't in those days. And, you know, it was something that I knew I really did want to do. But one thing I thought of is actually, I'd like to be a barrister. I'd been following barristers, you know, for work all the time. So I thought, actually, I could do this. I think I would be quite good at this. It looks like it's fun. But of course, again, what then brought me back to earth was the fact that at that stage, you were receiving as a grant, if you did a pupillage, 10,000 or something. Mm. Whereas if you became a solicitor and, you know, did a training contract, you were getting probably 19 to 20,000. I had a dependent, so there wasn't you know, much thinking about it. I needed to take the job that paid the most money, but I still had a passion to do advocacy. So what I then did was I did the course that makes you, obviously that allows you to do your higher rights, and, you know, did that for a while, and it was great. So I was able to actually fulfill my dream in terms of advocacy, but also still do something that I loved, which was what I'm doing now as a solicitor. So I think what I would say for people is, no matter where you start from, there's always a way. And, you know, if you're right at the bottom, you can't go any lower. Mm. So all you can do is just keep growing and building and climbing. Yeah. And so that's kind of what I would say about my journey.
And one of the things you've said, Cecilia, is becoming a solicitor for all of the reasons you've said, but having an aspiration to be a barrister. And I think Ravinder is probably unique amongst us in having trodden both of those paths. So I want to ask Ravinder about your experience, Ravinder, having been in both parts of our profession, and how that compares in terms of the challenges that you've faced.
Yes. Well, I came to the UK with my family when I was 4 years old, so I am a first-generation immigrant. I was the youngest of 4 and the only girl, and grew up in quite a traditional Sikh background family. I was very clear from an early age that I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to do criminal law, and I remember a conversation with my father where he said, no daughter of mine is going to go into prisons. Oh, how awful. And he sort of said, "Oh, why don't you do something nice?" So I said, "Well, yeah, you know, let's see how it goes." I went to university, one of the first in my generation. Came down to London with my heart set on being a criminal lawyer. I didn't know anybody. I had no contacts in the law whatsoever. And it was difficult to know where to start. So I went along to Victoria Station, and they used to have these card machines where you could print out a card with your name and your number on it, like a business card. And I walked up and down Kilburn High Road, and I knocked on the door, literally knocked on the door of every single solicitor's practice on Kilburn High Road, and introduced myself and said, "This is who I am. This is what I want to do. Is there anything you could do to help me?" And somebody called me from one of the firms and said, "Well, it's not crime, but how do you fancy going to the Home Office to assist some clients on immigration interviews?" I said, "Yes, thank you." And literally from there, from that small step and saying, "Here I am," and being given an opportunity, that developed into being offered some experience in criminal work, suddenly being offered an opportunity to go to a police station. That was where I started. I would say that the importance of an attitude of gratitude, being grateful for every contact you make, nurturing, taking care with those contacts is invaluable. I remember speaking to a friend about my aspirations to do criminal law properly, and she said, "Oh, actually, I know a partner in a criminal firm. I'll give you a letter of introduction." And that was one of the senior crime partners at Hodge, Jones and Allen. And he said, "Oh, well, you know, lovely to speak to you. Do keep in touch. And, you know, if something comes up, we'll let you know." And I kept in touch. I would pop in every 2 or 3 weeks and say, "Hi, how are you? You know, how are things going? Is there anything I can do?" And I kept going, and I knocked on the door, and I kept going, and I kept going. And then suddenly an opportunity came up for a paralegal in the criminal team, my dream job at that moment. And I was called in, and I was given an interview, and I was offered the role. And that was the beginning proper of my journey in law. At the end of my year of paralegling, I remember going to a chambers party, and I was standing and chatting to somebody, and from behind me I could hear a very senior old barrister, very establishment, and he was talking about me with my back to him. He obviously didn't know that I could hear what he was saying. And I remember his words, and I remember them today, and it was, "Oh yes, well, Ravinder, she's doing awfully well considering where she's from." And that made me feel really quite cross, and really question whether I wanted to be constantly fighting in a chambers hierarchy structure where people like that, with that sort of opinion, may have a sway on where my practice develops. And I decided that the best way for me was to be the author of my own fortune or misfortune, to make my own destiny. And I felt that the way that I would be able to do that was to go the solicitor route, to be the one who brings the clients, who meets the clients, who develops the work, who makes those decisions about who will then be the voice for my client in court in the future. And I didn't regret it at all. Did my LPC at part-time. I studied for 2 years at night school. I qualified. I went to Hickman and Rose, a fantastic firm. But I realised within the first 2 years that actually being a solicitor wasn't what I wanted to be. I had realised that I wanted to be an advocate. My passion was advocacy. I wanted to find another way of doing what I wanted to do. And for me, that was going freelance. My mentor, I shall call him, to say, this is what I'm thinking of doing. What's your advice? And he said, well, why don't you're a duty solicitor, come to us, be a consultant and grow what you want to do. And that's what I did. So I gained my higher rights of audience. I became a Crown Court advocate. And for many years, 18 years, I had a very happy career as a freelance solicitor advocate. And then I reached, I think, a wall, really, a ceiling, where it became clear if I wanted to do bigger, better work, it was going to have to be as a barrister. And so I applied to cross-qualify, and I haven't looked back. It's been absolutely fantastic as a journey. What would I say to my 18-year-old self? Well, never let no or rejection stop you or diminish you, because there's always another way to get to where you want to be. You just have to keep your mind open and look for that other opportunity. An open mind is absolutely the way forward. Just don't give up, because it takes one conversation, one contact, one question that can really open a door for you that you hadn't expected to be there.
Something that everyone has mentioned, you've just said there about contacts, and you've mentioned a mentor, and Thalia spoke of sponsors, and I think Sandra said allies. And I suppose they're all different ways of saying that we have people who've helped us on our journey. Perhaps there are role models. And I just want to ask about Ashwinder's journey into the profession, and whether you had role models who helped you along the way, and how important you think that is for people from our various backgrounds coming into our profession. But thank you, Ravinder.
So my background is that my parents were first generation migrants into this country. My dad actually had a degree in India, but when he came to this country, he came here to provide a better life for his children. So his degree didn't hold any worth in this country, and so he worked as a factory worker. He worked night shifts, he worked all the hours that God could send, so that his 5 children had the best opportunities available to him. Similarly, my mum was training to be a nurse when her parents decided it was time for her to get married, and she had to stop her training before she could complete her education. So growing up, education has been, part of our foundation. The importance of it, the power that it gives you, the ability that it will give you to get to where you want to be, has never been underestimated. And I've grown up in an environment where I went to a state school in an area where people would probably regard it as a rough area, come from an underprivileged background. But I never felt like I came from an underprivileged background. I felt as though I had everything. The school that I went to, I didn't feel like an ethnic minority, because actually the area I lived in was made up of mainly ethnic minorities. And when I started secondary school, my tutor, who was my tutor for 5 years, said to me and my parents, there's something in her, she'll be head girl one day. And she nurtured me. She introduced me to the debating society, and I used to represent our school. And I did. I went on, and when I left sixth form, I was head girl, and I had a really positive journey. And I never ever considered that I was from a minority background, because I never felt it. I went to law school with aspirations to become a barrister. I always knew I wanted to become a barrister, and I was determined. I was really focused and feisty and everything that I'd been brought up to be with those people around me. And actually the experience of applying for pupillage I found really tough, because I went to bar school and my performance at bar school was on par with my counterparts, with my white male counterparts. I went to university at Red Brick University. I went to the University of Birmingham. So on paper, I felt as though I was ticking all the right boxes. However, for some reason, my white male counterparts who'd been to Oxford or Cambridge were getting interview after interview, offer after offer, and actually had their pick of offers. And I was sat there struggling just to get my foot in the door and get into interviews. And then once I was finding myself in those interviews, I think that was the first time that I felt that insecurity, and it had almost seeped in, I feel. And I think in that environment, I felt, am I eloquent enough? Am I clever enough? Am I saying the right things? Is my vocabulary, the breadth of what the words that I'm using, is that good enough? And I think maybe that partially held me back, and maybe I underperformed, or maybe there were barriers there that I just wasn't, for whatever reason, wasn't able to make my way through. Three years after I was called, I started work at ABV. And when I started work in the firm that I'm in, one of the partners who was interviewing me, when we were talking about my background and everything that I'd done, and I'd done loads of mini pupilages, I'd shadowed, there were so many things on my CV that he was going through, and he was like, I can see where you've come from. You're hardworking. It's made you who you are. And I was like, finally, someone can see that actually where I come from is an asset. It's not something that should be seen as a disadvantage. I'm not underprivileged. Actually, this makes me determined. It makes me ambitious. It makes me who I am. And it makes me somebody that has so much to offer if you just give me a chance. So I started working as a paralegal, and the first case I worked on with ABV, I was working on a multi-handed murder trial at the Old Bailey, and I loved it, and I was in my element, and I was just so happy. And then as I worked for them, I was still applying for pupillage and still not getting my foot through the door. And they said to me, what are you doing? Why don't you just transfer and become a solicitor? We will support you through that. They saw in me what I was trying to persuade everyone else that I had. And they gave me that opportunity. And they, at a time when my confidence had been knocked by the process, they reignited my self-belief and my confidence in me. And so I did my qualified lawyer's transfer test. And within a year of being admitted as a solicitor, I qualified as a police station rep and a duty solicitor, and I literally hit the ground running. I was on my feet. I was in the magistrates' courts doing advocacy. I think one of my first appearances in the magistrates' court, I had to somebody wasn't able to cover court, and I had to step in at the last minute and oppose a bad character application, which I was petrified about doing, but I did it, and actually I was successful. And I was just like, actually, I can do it. I do have everything that it takes. And then since then, it's just, I've worked on, the most serious cases. I've done terrorism cases, murder cases. I'm working in the financial crime team at the moment. I deal with complex frauds. And I sit in rooms with QCs and barristers and people from Oxford and Cambridge and Eton, and I can hold my own. I can have conversations with them. And actually, the role models that I've had throughout my career are the everyday role models.
Yeah. And
I think they are so much more powerful. And if you look out for them, they are there, and you can go out and find them as well. So, whether it was my tutor at school, whether it was my parents, my family, my husband, the partners at ABV, my colleagues at ABV, we have such a good support network where everybody pushes each other to do that little bit more and believes in each other, and it makes you the best version of who you are.
Alexandra, I think you are the youngest, or certainly one of the youngest amongst us, and really amazingly, you've written a book which is a great inspiration to people coming into the profession. So I want to ask you to share with us what inspired you to write the book, and what experiences you've had that shaped that.
Thank you, Judy. I think one of the first things was just coming to the bar as a lot of people have said, I couldn't see anyone that looked like me. And to be completely honest, even today, in being in this Zoom session, it was so nice and refreshing to see so many other women who are also from, you know, Black or other minority backgrounns. And, you know, even seeing Judy with like dark curly hair, it's just like it's not something that I see often. So it's really, really nice. In terms of my experience, I'm mixed race. My grandparents, so my dad's Black, my grandparents are from Jamaica, like Thalia. And so, in fact, I think I've seen Thalia at court before and heard her accent, and I was like, oh, I got really excited. It was lovely. So that's my background. I grew up in Essex, and I can relate to a lot of the discussion about being conscious of accents. I think that was something I was really conscious of, particularly because I then went on to Oxford, where there's not many people from Essex or mixed race people, and you know, it was something I became very, very aware of. In coming to the bar, I didn't know any barristers at all, and so I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. I think I kind of saw the profession like a lot of us. I like to talk, I like to argue, I like to put people's case forward. It seemed like the perfect fit, and then I got there and I was like, oh, not loads of Alexes around, you know. But I benefited from mentors as well. The two mentors I had applying to the bar, Tunde Okawale at Doughty Street, and Leslie Thomas, who's at Garden Court with Judy as well. And they were people that I reached out to. I saw them, they were, you know, visible Black men, and I thought that felt most relatable to me. And so I reached out, and they were both absolutely brilliant. I try and, as everyone here does, I try and give back too. So I mentor students now, and I think it's really important that we're visible, and it shouldn't be a burden that we have to carry, because actually, you know, we have every right to not want to be out there and not want to be all over social media and pushing for people to enter the profession. It's not our duty to do it, but I think we can make a real difference by doing things like that. And so I try and make myself really accessible to generations coming up. People can, you know, reach out to me on Instagram, Twitter and things like that, and I think it's a good way for people to ask those what might be, you know, they might feel as silly questions that I'd quite like to ask before coming. In terms of my book, I think the main inspiration was to provide some transparency for our profession. I think for too long now, our profession has kind of been seen as very closed, very elitist. Everyone's sort of aware how white, middle class it is, but I don't think people are aware of how it's changing, or the experience of those of us in the profession who are not those white, middle class, elite men. And so I think it's really important to hear a different voice in the profession, and that's what I've tried to do. So hopefully people enjoy it when it comes out. And yeah, I just want other people to not feel the way that I and many of us have expressed the way we felt, in that being the only one. I think it's really important that we come together in things like this and, you know, support each other. So.
Well, I think it's amazing that you've written a book. We can't miss out on an opportunity to plug it, to tell the name of the book so that we can all buy it.
It's called In Black and White. So,
okay, so we'll all look out for that. And in terms of role models, you work within the CPS, Tejal. So in your journey, in your career path, have you found that there have been role models that have helped you to reach your position in your career?
Yeah, there definitely have, and both when I was in defence and as a prosecutor, but I always saw women of colour in high positions, and it showed me that it's possible. When I was, something that's really resonated with me since we've been having these discussions is the thought that we need to empower those that are coming up from aspiring to be in the positions that we all are in, and knowing that it's possible. It's so important that when you're young, you are told you can instead of you can't. Because when I was younger, I was told you can't. Like, you're in this country. I write funny, so I have my paper slightly slanted when I write. And when I was at primary school, a teacher said to me, in this country, we don't put our paper this way, we have it this way. And that's always stuck, and I didn't know why. It just made me feel really bad and other and different. And then when I was at secondary school, I wanted to be a lawyer, and I was told, if you're not good at English, you can't be a lawyer. And I'd always had this little twang in my accent because I'd grown up with my grandparents. I listened to those things. And I went to university and I did a non-law degree. And when I was in my third year, I was talking to somebody about my aspirations, and I spoke about how I wanted to be a lawyer, and they asked what stopped you, and I explained everything. They were like, you can. It's not about being good at English. It's not about this, that, or the other. This is what it's about: hard work, determination, and if you've got that, you can do it. So I decided, okay, well, I can do it. So I did the law conversion, the conversion course, and I always, though, felt like I wasn't enough, because I wasn't a very confident person, and so I always felt like I wasn't enough. So I always felt like I had something to prove. And so when I was at law school, we used to have 5 days, but we would have 1 day off, and everyone else in that 1 day would do whatever they were doing. But I was an independent custody visitor, an appropriate adult. I worked at the law centre down the bottom of my road. I volunteered 1 day at a firm called Hereward and Foster. I just did so much. I think I burnt myself out a little bit, but I did so much, and because I knew what I wanted, and this was where I wanted to be, and I wanted to succeed. And I feel like if I had had someone early on, someone like me, to be able to say, you can, if you can believe, if you can see it in your mind, if you can conceive it, then you can do it. It's a dot. What you want is a dot, and it's that small that you can do it. I have to say, though, that I wouldn't change my path, because I feel like everything that I've done has grown me to be able to be good now, if that makes sense. And so I got this kind of scholarship type training contract where I applied at law school. I think there was about 500 of us that applied, and it was for somebody who was passionate about legal aid, and obviously I'd done all that work, and I got the training contract. It was the Henry Hodge traineeship, and I worked for the first year at the College of Law, and then the second year at Hodge Jones and Allen. And when I was at Hodge Jones and Allen, I saw solicitors, women of colour, who were solicitors, partners, and obviously, Sandra, you were one of those people. And I think that without having seen those people, and without those people being so open and warm to me, I don't think that I would have had the confidence to go on and do what I wanted to do in my heart of hearts. And so that's why I think it's so important for this network, and for people who, like a lot of you have said, don't know anybody who's a lawyer, or don't know the right path, or don't know how to go about it, that we give back, because there are so many people that help me to be where I am. Can you check this application? Can you help me with this? Midnight calls, I'm going to the Crown Court and I'm so worried about doing this application, can you help? And without those people, I wouldn't have felt like I could. Okay. So, and then coming to the CPS, I feel I can see it. I can see lots of women, but not just women. I see women of colour, and I see women with families, women with children. So again, it's given me that I can attitude, that I can aspire to be that, and it's not just a silly little dream, that it's something that is possible. Yeah. And I think that we need to do what we're doing with this discussion, and just let people know that this is possible. And you know, all of this crazy stuff that's going on at the moment will hopefully start to peter off, because these generations will rise and know how to empower
I
each
think,
other.
Tejal, obviously all of us are very aware of what's happened in Minneapolis and the Black Lives Matter campaign, which is something that will be very close to all of our hearts, I'm sure. And I just want to ask whether we feel that as lawyers from a BAME background, that we have an important part to play in the campaign that's happening now.
Yeah, one of the experiences for me is that, you know, I feel very visible at the moment in terms of my profession. I feel, you know, these are Black people who are dying. These are Black people, you know, whether it's the police or whether it's COVID, and that's a thing.
The last couple of weeks, I don't know about other people, but for me, I've just been really, really down about it. There's been times where I have been tearful, and I think what has been great for me is knowing that other people, perhaps who look like me or are as equally outraged as me, have also been feeling really, really upset and angry about it. And it's something that I think moving forward, there's a lot of work to be done. I don't think it's something that is just in America. Just before the George Floyd situation came about, I don't know if people heard about this guy in Manchester who was tasered by the GMP police in front of his 4-year-old son. That was, for me, really, really quite painful.
Yeah.
And it's something that actually has brought to the forefront that this happens in England. We have a real issue with racism in England. And as much as some people, we kind of don't want to admit it, or we think it's not as bad as in America, I think actually it's just our version sometimes is a bit more subliminal, a bit more, you know, there's nuances to it. But clearly this is a worldwide problem, and clearly there's something that has to be done here.
There is the continued overrepresentation of young Black men in the criminal justice system. You know, during COVID, you've had a disproportionate number of Black people being stopped and searched. So it all ties in with what's happening. So
in relation to BAME lawyers, I don't think it's something that we can deal with on our own. I think it's something that has to change within the whole system. So, for example, I'll give you a very quick example. There was one day when I was duty solicitor in London, at a well-known, one of the main courts in London, and I had to represent a white male who had been racially abusive to a security guard. He then said, "Well, I'm not talking to you. I don't want you. I'm not talking to you." And he walked out and slammed the door. The cell staff were brilliant, and they knew me already anyway, and they could kind of understand what had happened. And I was a bit shell-shocked because all I was trying to do was my job, regardless of what it is that he was alleged to have done. So I went upstairs to the courtroom and I explained to the court that I'd seen this person. This is what had happened. They don't want me to represent them. And they don't want me to represent them because of what I look like. It was clear. The court then listened to what I'd said. A white male solicitor who was there at the time and heard, who at the time was someone who was a colleague. I knew of him, he knew of me. I would class us as friends, loosely friends, you know, in the profession. He then says to the court, "Well, I'll represent him then." And the court sanctioned that. They said, "Okay, that's fine. If he doesn't want you, he can have this lawyer." So what happened in that situation was not only was there a situation where I was made to feel like there's something wrong with me, but also the court, my home in terms of I am a lawyer, didn't think, well, actually, this is wrong. Yeah. This is a duty solicitor that has been appointed by the state, and this is who you're going to have. If you don't want this person because of the color of their skin, you don't have anybody at all. You represent yourself. But secondly, for my white colleague to say, "I will do it," He failed to understand that by doing what he did, he was perpetuating the racism and what is actually happening. So I say, in terms of, what are the BAME, what can we do as lawyers? We call it out. I did call it out, and obviously I understand that obviously people were spoken to, but the way it happened with such ease. It was, we need to get through this busy list. He doesn't want you because you're black, so we'll get him a white lawyer, which is wrong. So it's really something that actually I think we all have a part to play, whether you're white, male, white, female, Asian. We all have to work together in this. And I'm happy that these protests are going on, because it is saying, actually, we have an issue here too. And it's something that has been swept under the carpet for too long. And now we really do have to do something.
It's important that we recognise, as you said, Cecilia, it's not something that's peculiar to Minneapolis. The reality is that young black men who've been killed at the hands of the police over many, many years, Christopher Alder, Sean Rigg, Mark Duggan, to name but a very few. And I think the difference with George Floyd's case and situation is that it was filmed. That's the only difference. It was filmed, and there's much more publicity around it. There's so much more social media now than for many of these other cases. And so it brings it to everybody's attention in a way that is graphic and shocking. But it's something that is not peculiar to America, and we shouldn't think that for a moment.
I had mentioned just now that, there continues to be a disproportionate number of black men, black young people who are stopped and searched by the police. We see it every year at Carnival, and we know of the reports during the lockdown. And Stopwatch is an organization that some of you may know, that among some of the things it does is documenting the disproportionate number of black people who are stopped and searched by the police. It's really, really important work. It's an amazing organization. I'm giving it a plug, guys, but look out for Stopwatch and volunteer if you can.
Because Sandra and I were on a panel after David Lammy brought out his review, and which you'll all know about. It was evidence-based. It found discrimination across the board in every walk of our legal profession, with the only exceptions being the jury. There was no evidence that they brought in results that were based on ethnicity, and the CPS charging decisions were found to be equitable. So those were the only two areas that escaped from this quite obvious evidence of discrimination. And David Lammy made all sorts of recommendations in his review, and I don't know of any of those recommendations actually being followed up. And I just want to know, Sandra, what your feeling is on that, because I think it's a real disappointment to have something that was so important at the time and thorough and evidence-based that nobody could just brush aside. Disappointing that it doesn't seem to have led to anything that I'm aware of.
So I think you're right. So across the piece, there are various bits of government and Ministry of Justice are talking about thinking about things. I think the CPS have had some progress or continue to do positive things. There's been a kind of small changes. So you'll see that there is outcome 22 now, which is effectively the deferred prosecution, which some areas are beginning to use, but it's really piecemeal. So when you look at across the piece, very little has happened, and you can see the increasing frustration, not just from people like David Lammy, but for all of us, because it's this extra thing that you kind of carry around every day, and you think, well, if having shown you the evidence, you're still not doing anything about it, then you're really giving me a message, right? You're telling me that this isn't important enough. And I think that one of the things that we can do is the things that you're saying in terms of being in touch, being involved, but making sure that the people who we are talking to, that they know that we see that nothing's been done about this. And you're asking me to come to work every day, play like everything is okay, be part of a criminal justice system where it's saying to me really clearly, tough, you know. So I think, I am disappointed. And I think moving from disappointed to angry if I'm honest. Yeah.
I've really thought a lot about this for obvious reasons. It's been at the fore for the past few weeks.
Yeah.
And I have to sometimes think past what we already know, because the death of George Floyd gives us absolutely no new information. So what do we do about it? It's about accountability. And it's very well saying, you know, we shouldn't have to, but the reality is that we do. And so we need to take practical steps.
I was just going to say, in the last couple of days, actually, an organisation has been set up called One Case at a Time.
Yeah, I know that one.
Yeah, so it's been set up, like I've been part of the team doing it, but it's been set up with the support of Black Men in Law, the Law Collective, Urban Lawyers, and a few other lawyers. And the whole aim is to be able to help Black people specifically when legal aid is not available. So in a financial remit, to be able to put them in contact with pro bono lawyers, which quite often it can be difficult to navigate the whole world of pro bono, because Advocate obviously is a brilliant organisation and I do a lot of work through them, but they're also, you know, burdened. They're overwhelmed with people that seek pro bono advice. So this is an organisation that's specifically been set up to help Black people. So anyone who's interested in being involved, I think at the moment we're in the process of trying to register as a charity so that we're actually in an official charity. It's already been getting quite a lot of support from people. So,
but I think the most important thing to try and bring about change is to start getting into schools more. And
absolutely, absolutely.
That's where we've got to strike, because I think the problem is by the time, because Laurie and I were involved in this initiative that Nick Hilliard did at the Bailey, where they were getting kids in who were on the cusp of being in gangs. And we talked to them, you know, they had all different people, a trauma surgeon, he's really well. And then myself and Laurie, we talked from the defence perspective, you know, so how easy it is to become involved, drawn into something because you're with someone who's got a knife and they decide to use it. And just the whole joint venture side of things. But I think that that's a great initiative. And if it saves one life, it's brilliant. But I actually think we need to get in there earlier. So that's what I want to see, more of us getting into schools.
The schools really do want to have organisations like ours, like Chambers, like the CPS, like solicitors firms. When I took over as head of pupillage at 25, I immediately changed it. No mini pupillage. What we do is we recruit from a school in every borough. So we just rotate a primary school and a secondary school. That these are children who would have no idea about access to law. And when you go in and they see people that look like you and you do a little mini mock trial with them, that plants the seed. And the schools, they want it. You know, they don't know, they're just not enough organisations who are giving up their time to go in. So we can practically do more.
It's about, for me, what's important is mobility, social mobility, making sure that people from all backgrounds, walks of life, do have a chance and an opportunity to try to fulfill their dreams. Because if you don't have that, if I didn't have Bernberg Pearson Partners, if I didn't have Murray's, I wouldn't be here today. But they saw something in me that they thought, actually, let's give it a shot, let's try. And that's what I would say for us, who I would say have made it, as in we are where we are now, we're established, is to always remember those that are trying to come up and to not sit down and think, actually, everything's fine now, because it's not. We still have a long way to go before there's more people that look like us, speak like us, walk like us, are in the roles that we're in.
The other thing for me was about allies, and I think you've called them sponsors, we talk about them as lots of things, but just having an ally, somebody who is noticing you, who is looking out for you, who is in the room when those conversations are happening about you. And your ally doesn't need to be somebody more senior to you. They don't have to be Black, they don't have to be a woman. They come in many shapes and sizes. And then the responsibility for me now is, wherever I get an opportunity to help somebody out, you just do it.
Yeah.
I know it's an extra job to do and I got enough on my plate, but it doesn't matter. If find a way to do it efficiently. And even if you can't do it yourself, make sure you kind of pass them on to somebody who can help them. Because if somebody hadn't done that for me, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here talking to you. I wouldn't have anything to say.
Yeah.
I think for me, the hardest thing was feeling that I didn't know how the system worked. And I think sometimes people just need a nudge in the right direction so that they can see what's available to them to help them achieve their goals.
You know, not having that network, not having a family base here, because I came over on my own. How have I overcome that feeling of being different and being on the outside to make it? And I mentioned sponsorship. We need sponsors, you know, and we need community. And the community, in terms of solicitors from the community and clients from the community, have also been very supportive of the journey. And I think in being true to you, you have to remember your journey. And you have to remember that you are a part of that community. And when you excel, that community feels rewarded in your success. And in being true to that community, you don't let them down. You reach out in the same way. You go back to the schools, as somebody has mentioned, or you mentor somebody who emails you, you know, because they see you as that black face in the chambers, and they come up to you and, you know, you take them on and you show them the journey. And, you know, I'm hopeful. Of course, there are going to be challenges, and there will continue to be challenges. But I think that young people also feel empowered by our own journeys and us standing out and us talking about the issues. And we must continue to do so. So, yeah.
I've listened with real interest. I think it's so fascinating to hear everyone's journey into the profession. And listening to what you've all said, I've thought the three things that have been common themes, really, in terms of the tips that we would give to other women, young women from BAME backgrounds coming into the profession. And the first of those is self-belief. That's emerged very clearly from everything that you've all said. The second thing is hard work. And I agree with Thalia completely. I felt coming into the profession that you were visible. And so in a sense, sometimes you felt people were looking at you to expecting you to not do the job properly, perhaps even wishing that you wouldn't do it properly. And so you had to be better than your white male counterparts. And by being better or working hard, making sure you knew your brief inside out, it made you visible in a positive way. So definitely second, hard work. And then thirdly, something that's emerged very much in the last few contributions is what we do to help each other, not pulling the ladder up, giving back, whatever you want to use by way of expression to convey that. It's not only looking out for ourselves, it's looking out for each other. And I think that's a really important thing. When you see people similar to us in robing rooms and they're in a position where they need some help, make yourself accessible. In the workplace, make yourself accessible to others. It's such an important thing, because it's only by doing that we help other people like us who are trying to make their way in what is still a white male middle class dominated profession, but changing all the time, I'm happy to say. Thank you so much. It's been really fascinating hearing from all of you. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Okay, take care, everybody.
Care, everyone.
All right. See you, everyone.
Bye. Bye. Bye.